Welcome back, Horror Fam, to day 14 of our Halloween Marathon. Tonight we're venturing into some truly dark and unsettling territory. Government cover-ups. These are the stories they never wanted you to hear. We're going to start tonight with the creepypasta that I'm convinced is at least partially real, even if only by accident. Then we're going to learn the 100% true story of the NYPD's cannibal cop. And end on one of the craziest government experiments, the Philadelphia experiment. From mysterious disappearances to terrifying conspiracies, tonight's stories will have you questioning just how much we don't know. So turn off the lights, settle in, and get ready for a journey into the shadows of government secrets.
When I first signed up with the Bureau, I knew I would see things. Messed up things. Things other people wouldn't want to see. And now? What time is it? What? What time is it? I have 4:33. We just started. You have 57 more minutes. You wouldn't lie to me, right? What does your watch say? 4:33. I was given a case. I was told to archive a post on Reddit. Someone was posting on the subreddit Scared at Work. It was like some game people play. People would post about times they were scared at work, or make up something creepy. I was told to archive everything I could about this, whatever this is. I work at a gas station out in Dingman's Ferry, Pennsylvania. It's a boring job, but it's pretty easy, and it pays all right. A few weeks ago, this new guy started. I'll call him Jeremy. Jeremy is weird. He's about 25 or 26, and he hardly speaks, but he has the creepiest laugh I've ever heard. My boss and I both noticed this, but it's never been a problem, so there's not much we can do about it. Customers have never complained about him, and he's always done his job fairly well. At least, up until a few weeks ago. Anyways, that's when things started going missing. Employee theft can be a problem at any business that sells consumer goods, and there's only one person at a time working at this gas station. It's a pretty small place. About 2 weeks ago, my boss started noticing that we were short on motor oil. At first, it was a few containers at a time. Then entire shelves and boxes from the back room. Pretty soon, entire shipments would be gone the day after we got them. And it would always be right after Jeremy's shifts. My boss started checking the security camera tapes from every single night Jeremy worked. But he could never catch him in the act. Jeremy would lock up at closing, and then the motor oil would be gone the next day. My boss usually takes the tapes home with him to try to catch Jeremy stealing, but his daughter had a softball game last night, so he asked me to watch the tape for him. He offered to pay me overtime, under the table, so I obviously took that offer. There are 3 cameras, so he gave me 3 different tapes to check. I figured it would be a long night, but I'm trying to save up for a vacation, so I really needed the money. I took the tapes home, popped them in an old VCR, and sat back. 2 days ago, the last time Jeremy worked, he started at 4 p.m. Everything seemed pretty normal at first. He counted up his drawer, switched off with the girl that was working before him, and waited for a customer. The first person who came in was Miss Templeton. The timestamp on the video read 4:03. She's a regular. She picked up her cigarettes and a newspaper and paid with a 20. Nothing unusual there. The next customer was some local guy named Ron. He drives a motorcycle. Usually comes in every few days. He filled up his tank, got a bag of beef jerky, paid with his credit card, and then left. The next was some guy with a cowboy hat. I'd never seen him before. But we get plenty of strangers passing through, just like any other gas station. He got $40 worth of diesel fuel, paid with a $100 bill, and went on his way. I sat back and sighed. The only thing more boring than doing this job is watching someone else do it. My boss's offer was enough to keep me watching though, so I left the tape on. Everything seemed pretty normal. I had a feeling that if Jeremy was stealing motor oil, he knew we were suspicious of him by now. I didn't expect him to be dumb enough to let us catch him on camera. Things stayed boring and routine until about 5 o'clock. At 5:03, Miss Templeton came back in. She must have forgotten something. But she didn't. She bought the same pack of cigarettes as before, and the same newspaper. She paid with another 20. That's odd, I thought. But then again, she's a little absent-minded. I thought Jeremy should have told her she already had her smokes, but it's not against the rules to sell somebody the same thing twice. That's when Ron came in again. He bought another tank of gas for his motorcycle again. I later checked the outdoor camera because I thought he had a car that he wanted to fill up. He also bought the same pack of beef jerky. He paid with his credit card again. No big deal. I figured this was just a weird coincidence. Miss Templeton is forgetful, and Ron probably owns more than one Harley. That's when the guy in the cowboy hat came back in. I felt a chill run down my spine. Don't get Diesel. Don't get Diesel. I found myself whispering to my empty living room. But he did. He got $40 worth of diesel fuel and paid with another $100 bill. Every move he made was identical to the first visit, right down to the way he scratched his nose before he walked out. Either this guy is rich, owns a lot of trucks and just moved into town, or something really bizarre was happening. Every customer for the next hour was the same as before. Every single one. I was seriously freaked out. And then at 6:03, Miss Templeton walked back in. She bought her cigarettes and newspaper again, and paid with a 20 again. I thought I was gonna lose it. I only watched another half an hour before I started fast-forwarding through the rest. It was all the same. Every customer would come in at the exact same times, exactly 1 hour apart. Now I know what you're thinking. That sneaky asshole Jeremy must have messed with the tapes and found a way to run a loop of the first hour of business over and over. But that wasn't the case. The store has windows, and I watched as daylight faded into night. Also, Jeremy's routine didn't loop over. He swept, mopped, restocked, and did all of his duties exactly how you would expect. But the same customers kept coming in. I was panicking at this point. Something was seriously wrong with what I was seeing, and I had no explanation for it. I skipped ahead to when he locked up and walked out to his car. He hadn't stolen anything, but I kept watching, just to make sure. I fast-forwarded one last time to about midnight. At exactly 12:03, out of nowhere, Jeremy's face pops up on camera. I don't mean he moved his head into view. I mean that 1 second the store was empty, and the next second his face was all I could see. He wasn't looking at the camera though. He was looking at me. I was sure of it. I screamed and fumbled for the remote, but by the time I grabbed it, he was gone. He left just as soon as he'd arrived. One frame he was there, and the next he wasn't. My hands were shaking like crazy, but I popped in another tape. The other indoor camera shows the back area by the cash register. I would be able to see how he got up to put his face in the camera like that. I skipped ahead to 12:03. but there was nothing. I would have been able to see him standing on a chair or something on this tape, but he wasn't there. I also didn't see him enter the store at all, or leave. It's like he wasn't really there. What I did see, however, was that at 12:03, the motor oil vanished off the shelf. All of it. Same as Jeremy's face. 1 second it was there, and the next it wasn't. I turned that tape off and went to bed, but I didn't get a wink of sleep. My body is exhausted right now, but my mind is racing. That tape was undoubtedly the creepiest, most disturbing thing I've ever seen in my life. I work in a few hours. My boss asked me to bring the tapes back in and let him know what I found. But really, what the hell am I gonna say? Jeremy works the night shift tonight, directly after me. I don't want to be there when all this goes down. What if he somehow knows I was the one that saw him on the tapes? I have no idea what I'm gonna do. I suppose I'll have to show my boss the tapes, but I don't want to watch them with him. Anyway, I'm gonna try again to get some last minute sleep before I have to go in and deal with this. I'll let you guys know what happens. I'm updating from my phone. Apologies in advance for errors. My boss just finished watching the last of the tapes. I told him what to expect. But you can't really prepare someone for something like that. He's scared shitless. I am too. And Jeremy is due to come in at 4. We've got a little over an hour to get our shit together, but none of us knows what to say to him. Is he just some creep who likes to steal motor oil and scare the shit out of people? Or is he something else? And what about the time loop? Has anyone here on Scared at Work ever seen anything like this before? My boss said he never noticed anything like that in the other tapes, but maybe he wasn't watching that hard. If he just fast-forwarded the tapes, he might not have noticed. Or maybe Jeremy knew we would be watching, and that's why he did that crazy head-popping thing. The way he smiled into the camera was like a little kid, showing you a sandcastle they just built. Maybe he was showing off. I don't know. I probably sound crazy. I sure feel the part. I'm going to talk to my boss some more. We have to calm ourselves down and figure out how to handle this. I'll update again tonight, but I have a really bad feeling about how this is going to play out. Yeah. There's no sign of Jeremy. We tried calling him, but his phone's been disconnected. We're calling the police. Yeah. There's no sign of Jeremy. We tried calling him, but his phone's been disconnected. We're calling the police. There's no sign of Jeremy. There's no sign of Jeremy. There's no sign of Jeremy. We tried calling him, but his phone's been disconnected. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god! I just got home and saw my previous updates. Things make less sense now than ever. Here's what I can tell you. I went to work. Jeremy never showed up. My boss and I decided to call the police, as you're well aware. When I picked up the phone to call though, the sun went out. I shit you not, that's what happened. Apparently I blacked out for exactly 5 hours, because when I looked at the clock, it was 9:33. I think I got stuck in Jeremy's time loop, and then snapped out of it at the exact point I blacked out, if that makes any sense. But that's when things really got weird. My boss was right next to me when I blacked out, ready to corroborate my story to the cops. When I came to, the phone was in my hand, but it was dead. Not even a dial tone. My boss was right there, but he wasn't moving. He was standing up, but frozen. I looked at the clock again, and it wasn't moving. The second hand was stuck on 12. It was exactly 9:33. The clock on the register wasn't moving either. My phone was frozen. There was even a customer at the register waiting for my boss to get him cigarettes. I'm betting that would have been his 5th pack of the day. I got the hell out of there. I didn't lock up, didn't turn the lights out, and sorry guys, I didn't grab the security tapes to upload them to the internet. Believe me, that was the last thing on my mind. The people inside were still as statues. I got in my car and prayed it would start. Thankfully it did. About halfway home, time started up again. The static from the radio turned into music like it's supposed to be. And from what I could tell by listening to the host talk in between songs, no one noticed the time freeze. Or whatever it was. I was the only one. Well, I'm sure Jeremy noticed as well. I still have no clue where he is or what he's doing. I'm hiding in my room and calling the police again in the morning. I don't know if I ever got through to them before, or I might have called them 5 times and they think I'm playing some stupid prank. I'm scared for my life at this point. I'll update tomorrow if I can. I finally fell asleep last night around 4. I have no idea how I did it. I guess exhaustion finally got the best of me. This morning I woke up to my phone ringing. It was my boss. He'd been calling me since about 6. He woke up when time turned back on last night and immediately called the cops. They came by to see what was wrong, and he told them everything. The police around here are small-time guys. They were more concerned with the missing motor oil than anything. But my boss figured he would take it, as long as he had their attention. They decided to go looking for Jeremy. We keep all of our employee applications on file, and since Jeremy just started working here, his was easy to find. They checked the address on it and headed over to his house. You're not gonna believe what they found. The address Jeremy listed on his application was an empty lot, or at least, now it is. There used to be a house there, but it burned down in 1993. Being a small town, almost everyone remembers that fire. A family of 4 used to live there way back when. Rumor has it that they had an estranged son, who they never really talked about. But I can't say for sure if that's true. What I can say is true is that after an insurance investigation, the fire was ruled arson. The entire house was soaked in oil and torched with a Molotov cocktail. The entire family was sleeping when it happened. None of them survived. They never caught the guy who did it either. Rumor has it when they tried to contact the estranged son, no one could find him. Anyway, my boss called and told me this, and I freaked out. Then he asked me to come to the gas station. What, are you crazy? I said. He assured me that the cops were there with him. Then he dropped a bomb. The FBI were also in town, and they were going to talk to me one way or another, so I might as well come in. It was about 7:15, and I wanted to go back to bed, but I figured I wouldn't be able to sleep much more anyway. So I went down. Men in suits greeted me and told me to have a seat. We went over everything 2 or 3 times, until they got all the details down. I told them about everything. Jeremy, the security tapes, last night at work. Everything. Finally, after I finished, one of the agents said, "Oh Christ, we've got another one on our hands." Then they made me sign a bunch of papers, saying I wouldn't tell anyone about what happened, so I can't say much more. I might be breaking the law just by posting this, so now I'm home again. I'm not sure what to do with myself. That agent's words when I told him, they're gonna haunt me for the rest of my life. Anyway, I've gotta go. I have some errands to run today, and then I have to go to work to pick up some tapes. My boss and I think this new guy Jeremy is stealing motor oil, and I have to watch a bunch of security footage to see if I can catch him doing it. I have better things to do, but my boss is paying me overtime, under the table, and I'm trying to save up for a vacation, so I could really use the money. It should be pretty simple. The oil always goes missing right after his shifts. I figure I'll just watch the tapes, catch him in the act, and that'll be that. After I archived it, I was instructed to take it all down, so there wasn't even a trace of it. And this bothers you? I mean, I guess, but, what time is it? What? What time is it? I have 5:33. We've just started. You have 57 more minutes. You wouldn't lie to me, right? What does your watch say? 5.
Surrounded by gummies, he was terrified.
This case is about the line between fantasy and criminal intent. Although it is increasingly challenging to identify that line in the internet age, it still exists. And it must be rationally discernible in order to ensure that a person's inclinations and fantasies are his own and beyond the reach of the government. That's what was said. Those were the words that allowed Gilberto Valle to be released for time served. Every one of us has had criminal fantasies, often from a young age. We've imagined how great it would be to perform some heist to change our school grades. Or, after an exciting movie, we might even speak with our friends about how great it would be to successfully rob a bank, like in the movies, and live out our days with our share. But that's where it ends, for most of us. Today we look at the case of Gilberto Valle, labeled the cannibal cop of the NYPD. A man convicted of conspiring to kidnap, torture, kill, and cannibalize women, but whose sentence was overturned because a judge felt this was too close to the government punishing thoughts. Gilberto Valle was born in Queens, New York in 1984. He attended Archbishop Motley High School. Afterwards, he attended the University of Maryland, graduating in 2006 with a degree in psychology. Valle would join the New York City Police Department shortly after, and was assigned to the 26th Precinct in Morningside Heights, Manhattan. In 2010, he married Kathleen Mangan, whom he'd met on the dating website OkCupid. They had a daughter in early 2012. On the outside, everything seemed normal, boring even. But on October 25th, 2012, Valle was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping. The arrest occurred after his wife reported to police that she had found in his internet search engine history a series of chat room communications on an online forum dedicated to sexual fetishes and fantasies involving torture, forced sexual encounters, murder, and cannibalism. Valle had been chatting with other users about torturing and murdering his wife, as well as murdering and cannibalizing more than 100 other women. Throughout the trial, Valle claimed that the chatroom communications were mere fantasy, and that he had no intention of acting on them. He was found guilty of all charges in March 2013. In June 2014, Judge Paul G. Gardef of Federal District Court overturned Valle's conviction on the conspiracy charge, saying the evidence supported his claim that he was engaged in only fantasy roleplay. Valle had at this point served 21 months in prison. But does being a fantasy make something harmless? At what point does the scale move from fantasy to conspiracy? According to Judge Gardef, even though the jury plays a critical role in our legal system, a judge has a responsibility to ensure that the government satisfies its burden of establishing proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And it was Judge Gardef's belief that the prosecution failed to do this. He also believed that due to how extraordinary the case was, combined with the knowledge that Valle was a police officer at the time, that the jury was holding Valle to a higher standard than it would a civilian. We don't have juries of one. Even if only one juror felt this way, it shouldn't matter. If all 12 felt this way, then doesn't it show there was good reason? Isn't the point of a jury to decide what is important and what is not? Officers are trusted to enforce the law. This affords them privileges. They are armed, have insider knowledge of how crimes are investigated, and have privileged access to government databases. All things that would benefit someone attempting to kidnap, torture, and kill someone. If the jury felt these were things that should be considered, why should a judge be allowed to say otherwise, especially when the juries are not the one that decide the penalties for the crime, only whether or not one has been committed? To decide that Valley was guilty of conspiracy to kidnap only required that he and at least one other co-conspirator agree to abduct someone. They must have a motive for the abduction and take at least one overt step to abduct. The jury felt the evidence at the trial was sufficient to conclude that Valley made an agreement with Dale Bollinger, a man he met on the dark web, to kidnap and murder Kimberly Sauer, one of Valley's friends from college. During the earliest communication logs available between Valley and Bollinger, Valley sought Bollinger's assistance kidnapping and cannibalizing women. Bollinger was valuable because he claimed to have real-world experience. Valley would share pictures with Bollinger of potential victims. Some were simply pictures he found online. Others were of women Valley knew well and would have access to, up to and including his wife. Bollinger agreed to help Valley, stating that although he lived in England, it would be easy for him to travel to Valley. The two focused on Kimberly Sauer as their preferred target. Valley told Bollinger that she would be the easiest to abduct. They discussed stalking Kimberly in the evening. They considered logistical and practical concerns, noting that she lived alone in a small house, far from family that might notice her absence. Valley offered to do a dry run, in which he would show up randomly one day, just being in the neighborhood. He explained that because he knew her personally, he could just show up at her home unannounced, without alerting her, in order to knock her out and kidnap her. They planned to use chloroform to incapacitate her, which Valley offered to make himself. They agreed that when buying materials they should use cash. They also decided to line the trunk of Valley's car in plastic bags, and use gloves and a new pair of really cheap, common trainers that would be destroyed after the abduction, probably by burning. Valley suggested what he called a Labor Day cookout, with Kimberly as the main course. Bollinger replied that he was looking forward to it, and would search for affordable plane tickets. In multiple conversations over the course of a few weeks, Valley and Bollinger continued discussing the details of abducting and murdering Kimberly. They also developed their plans to cook and eat her. Valley and Bollinger debated the merits of roasting her alive in an oven or over a rotisserie. They further discussed how she would be gagged and butchered. Valley promised to get a brand new set of knives, and Bollinger advised they would need a cleaver, not a saw. As they plotted Kimberly's abduction, Bollinger and Valley expressed excitement about their plan. Valley shared his happiness that Bollinger was on board, and said that he loved imagining Kimberly asleep right now, not having the slightest clue of what they planned. Bollinger replied that he was looking forward to it so much. Valley said that he could not wait to see the look on her face when she wakes up naked and tied up. Valley noted that it was good they were brainstorming, because everything needed to be perfect. They would talk in great detail about every step, suggested Valley, beginning with the rag in her face. Bollinger and Valley confirmed to each other their genuine intention to follow through on their plan. At one point, Bollinger asked Valley, "You will go through with this. I've been let down before. That's why I tend to work alone." Valley immediately replied, "Yes," adding that Kimberly would never see it coming, and that he was anxious to kidnap and eat her. In another email, Valley assured Bollinger that kidnapping Kimberly and getting away with it was an absolute truth. As disturbing as all of this is, without overt steps taken to further their plan, it does not qualify as conspiracy. But on top of these conversations that show agreement and intent, Valley sent Bollinger a blueprint of their plot entitled Abducting and Cooking Kimberly. Valley's search history for that time showed he searched for Kimberly's name, how to kidnap someone, how to abduct a girl, good methods to kidnap someone, how to knock someone unconscious, how to chloroform a girl, how to tie someone up, most secure bondage, and how to hog-tie a girl. Valley also planned a trip, with his wife and young child, to Maryland, where Kimberly lived. Valley contacted Kimberly before the trip, and they planned a lunch while he and his family were in town. Before leaving for Maryland, Valley explained to Bollinger his lunch with Kimberly would stimulate ideas for how to cook her, remarking that when he saw her, his mouth would be watering. The two also discussed the lunch as a way to confirm their choice of Kimberly as their preferred target. When Valley had a moment of indecision about whether to target a different woman instead of Kimberly, Bollinger advised they keep the others as spares and see how the lunch with Kimberly goes. Bollinger further wished Valley good luck, cautioned him to act normally during the lunch, because he would be a suspect when Kimberly goes missing, and asked him to report what he learned. Shortly after having lunch with Kimberly, Valley wrote to Bollinger that she looked absolutely mouth-watering. Between Valley's blueprint and his scouting lunch trip, the prosecutors felt they had what they needed for the conspiracy charge, and the jury agreed. So why was the jury's decision overturned a year later? According to the judge, all of Valley's doings were nothing more than deep fantasy roleplay. As evidence of this, it was brought up that Valley and Bollinger ultimately made no attempt to kidnap Kimberly on Labor Day. Yet Valley and Bollinger explicitly stated their plans were incomplete and needed more work. When Valley sent Bollinger the blueprint, he acknowledged that obviously a lot has to be added, because they were in the beginning stages. Throughout their discussions of Kimberly, Valley and Bollinger also considered other women for potential targets. The evidence supports the inference that Valley and Bollinger agreed on a basic framework and set up a potential date, but then focused on other targets or plans that they later found more appealing. Another issue brought up by the judge were lies woven into the blueprint Valley sent Bollinger. Valley lied about some important facts, like where he lived, whether he remembered Kimberly's address, and whether he owned a secluded mountain house that the crime could be committed at. But Valley's lies don't prove this was fantasy. Valley was a police officer and had a 4-year degree in psychology. He could have decided to omit information that could be used to identify himself or more easily find Kimberly. Valley also might not have fully trusted Bollinger, whether he was worried Bollinger was an undercover officer or that Bollinger would move forward with the plans without him. Bollinger himself assumed that mistrust was Valley's reason for not sharing certain information. When Valley claimed to not know Kimberly's address, Bollinger replied, "It's not like I'll get there a day early." And Valley's lies about what he possessed to facilitate the crime, such as a secluded mountain house, were in response to Bollinger's concerns about the plan's effectiveness. Let's not forget, Bollinger had mentioned being let down before. Valley might have lied to ensure Bollinger's interest. After all, what's harder to find? A secluded hunting cabin to rent? Or someone that claims to have experience abducting and cannibalizing people? Also, Valley would not be the first defendant to mislead a co-conspirator. Criminals are not known to be honest. How does one criminal lying to another criminal mean the conspiracy was not real? How was this even considered by the judge? The judge was correct to call the case of Gilberto Valley extraordinary. But due to the secretive nature of conspiracies, it's rare, even in the best cases, to have a complete picture of the crime. And maybe even more interesting, that more than a year later, when the media attention had died down, he was let off for time served. In 1943, a top-secret government project malfunctioned, causing a U.S. naval ship to time travel and the crew to suffer disastrous fates. This is the story of the Rainbow Project, more commonly known as the Philadelphia Experiment. Many experiments were conducted during World War II. Governments were even testing on the public without their knowledge. Their focus? Weapons. The first nuclear weapons were created during this time, and different chemicals were being tested for how useful they'd be in chemical warfare. US ships were constantly delivering supplies to Europe to support the war effort, but the ships were regularly being attacked by German U-boats. In 1942, around 6 million tons of supplies were lost, and 30,000 sailors lost their lives. Something needed to be done. The Allies, led by Great Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union, were desperate to find a way to stop the ships from being destroyed by the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. So they started researching and experimenting with different ways to cloak their ships. The story of uncovering the truth about the Philadelphia experiment starts after the war, though, on January 12, 1955, with a Professor Morris K. Jessup. Jessup was born in Rockville, Indiana. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in astronomy from the University of Michigan in 1925, and, while working at the Lamont Husey Observatory, received a Master of Science degree in 1926. He wrote the book, The Case for the UFO. In this book, he talks in detail about the study of theoretical power sources for UFOs. It was his belief that anti-gravity was used as the power source of UFOs. Jessup began receiving strange letters from a man named Carlos Miguel Allende, aka Carl Allen. Allen was born in 1925 in Springdale, Pennsylvania. He joined the Marines in 1942 and the Merchant Navy in 1943. Later he was discharged and then served on the SS Andrew Furuseth. He worked on 27 different ships before leaving in 1952. In the first letter, Carl advised Jessup to not research the levitation of unidentified flying objects. Then he talked about a theory called the unified field theory, a theory by Albert Einstein that was not well known. The unified field discusses the unification of electromagnetism and gravity into one single field. Allen claimed that a scientist named Franklin Reno used the unified field theory in Philadelphia on a naval ship in October 1943. He said in the experiment, generators were used in an attempt to cloak the ship. Allen said he was aboard the SS Andrew Furuseth and observed the bizarre events that resulted from this experiment. However, during this experiment, an unexpected malfunction occurred, which resulted in the ship being teleported and the crew suffering horrific side effects, the stuff of nightmares. On October 28, 1943, the SS Eldridge was in a port in Philadelphia. On board the ship were hundreds of tons of electronic equipment and generators. When the generators were turned on, witnesses say the ship became engulfed in a green fog. And then soon after, a flash of bright blue light was seen. Then the ship completely disappeared. Even radar could not detect the ship. The experiment appeared to have been a success. Just a little while later, the ship then appeared at the naval base in Norfolk, Virginia. After maybe 5 minutes, it disappeared again and was back at the base in Philadelphia where it started. An investigation was immediately launched, but what was discovered was terrifying. Crew members were seen walking through walls. Some had been severely burnt, some beyond recognition. Others had arms, legs, or other body parts burnt completely off. Some men were just frozen in place, and a few others had their bodies fused with the ship. Others who were not frozen or dead had gone mad, running the length of the deck, screaming and crying, some even sitting on the floor, laughing. Those in charge aborted the experiment and sent any survivors away quietly to institutions, keeping the whole thing under wraps. Family members were told that the men had been lost at sea. Some reports say survivors were held at Bethesda Naval Hospital for the rest of the war. The event was written about in the Philadelphia City paper. An excerpt reads, "Her crew, some of them staggering and speaking gibberish, was debriefed. They said they could see each other, but the ship was gone. Some of the men said others were falling to the deck and laughing hysterically, as if drunk. Others said that for a brief while, after the cloud that surrounded the ship at the start of the test flashed off, they could see their second port, the Norfolk Naval Shipyards. And then the cloud reappeared and flashed off again. They were back in Philadelphia." Allen's letters were often cryptic. An excerpt from one reads, "I speak of time, for deep, frozen men are not aware of time as we know it. They are like a semi-comatose person, who live but still are unaware of so utterly many things as to constitute a netherworld to them. A man in an ordinary common frieze is aware of time, sometimes acutely so. Yet they are never aware of time precisely as you and I are aware of it. The first deep freeze, as I said, took 6 months to rectify. It also took over $5 million worth of electronic equipment and a special ship berth. If around or near the Philadelphia Navy Yard you see a group of sailors in the act of putting their hands upon a felloe or upon thin air, observe the digits and appendages of the stricken man. If they seem to waver, as though within a heat mirage, go quickly and put your hands upon him, for that man is the very most desperate of men in the world. Not one of those men ever want at all to become invisible. I do not think that much more need be said as to why man is not ready for force field work. Jessup couldn't tell if these were the writings of a madman, or if there was something more to them. So Jessup wrote Allen asking him for more evidence of anything surrounding the Philadelphia experiment. Allen didn't provide Jessup enough evidence, so Jessup figured Allen may have been a nut and dismissed the letters. Years later, Allen would claim he wrote these things to scare the hell out of Jessup. Then later, in 1957, the Naval Research Office, the Special Weapons Division, was interested in Jessup's work and requested to have a meeting with him. They wanted to know about the theories on anti-gravity technology he had written about and what he knew about the 1943 Philadelphia experiment. While there, they showed him an annotated copy of his book, The Case for the UFO. Jessup observed that there were handwritten annotations on the pages of the book that looked just like the handwriting from the letters Carl Allen had sent to him. After the meetings with the Navy officers, Jessup became concerned that he may have been being spied on. He said he noticed that things would be moved from his desk, or missing, and his office often looked like someone had gone through his things looking for something. Jessup also said that he would see men wearing black suits, sitting in cars, and walking around outside his house. He would also get phone calls late at night, where the person on the other end would just hang up after he answered. He thought someone was after him, maybe trying to shut down his research. Things calmed down, and Jessup continued to try to research for more books, but he was having a hard time. He did write a few more books, but he ended up losing his publisher. So for the next few years he began looking more into the Philadelphia experiment, even though he had previously dismissed it. He began looking for any information he could find. He began to suspect Allen's writings contained some real truths of experiments done with stealth technology in Philadelphia. In 1958, he gave all his research to another writer he knew, Ivan T. Sanderson. Jessup told him to keep the research safe in case anything were to happen to him. Jessup had found things that did change his mind on the experiment, and he thought his life may be in danger. Then, in the late afternoon of April 20th, 1959, Jessup's lifeless body was found in his car at the Matheson Hammock Park in Florida. A man named John Good, a worker from the park, found him and called the police. The officially reported cause of death was carbon monoxide poisoning. The incident was said to happen because Jessup was depressed, but there were quite a few odd things that didn't really make sense. For one, the towels used in the windows to keep the carbon monoxide in were not from Jessup's house, according to his wife. It would be strange for him to buy new towels just to commit the deed. Also, there was no receipt found from a towel purchase on him or in the car. Also, the night before, Jessup was excited and on the phone with one of his good friends, Dr. Manton Valentine, about meeting up to discuss something he had discovered. Something big about the Philadelphia experiment case. Sadly, Dr. Valentine did not get to see what Jessup had found. Jessup was also pronounced dead by a doctor named Harry Reid, but no one could find him after the event. Jessup's wife would not identify the body, saying that he would never have done this to himself. So identification was done by a man named Leon A. Seol, a family friend, but no one in the family knew a Leon. On top of that, his briefcase was gone. No note was found, and no autopsy performed. Many believe what happened to Jessup was because he found something out that he wasn't supposed to. Most of Jessup's notes were taken, but what little was found said that during the experiment, part of the original crew was sent away, and others seemed to have disappeared. Any of the crew that could be found and asked about the event say they don't remember ever being on the USS Eldridge. It's believed that the original crew was quickly replaced to make it seem like the whole thing never happened. The Navy say this experiment never happened and that the USS Eldridge was not even in Philadelphia at the time. They say the Eldridge arrived with a convoy on December 17th at New York Harbor, and that the ship stayed there till December 31st. Then it, with 4 other ships, headed for Norfolk, Virginia. They say no records can be located that state any experiments or events of the sort ever took place. Many researchers believe these explanations have been fabricated to cover up what happened. There is one more strange piece to the story. In 1990, a man named Al Bielek claimed he was involved in the Philadelphia experiment. He said his memories were suppressed and that while watching the 1984 movie, the Philadelphia experiment's memories came flooding in. He said that the real-life event happened much like the movie. Al said he was aboard the USS Eldridge on an afternoon in October 1943. But he wasn't Al. He was a man named Ed Cameron, and him and his brother Duncan, who was another Navy officer, witnessed the terrifying event. He said that when the green fog engulfed the ship didn't just travel to Virginia, but forward in time. When the chaos and panic started, they jumped off the ship, and they went forward in time to 1983. What happened to Al, or Ed and his brother, is a video for another day. What really happened to the USS Eldridge? Did the ship really time travel, and the government's covering it up? It's possible if they did have this technology, they wouldn't want anyone to know they had access to it. And there are many technologies and experiments that are hidden from public, so anything is possible.
And that wraps up Day 14, Horror Fam! I hope these government cover-up stories sent chills down your spine and made you wonder what else might be lurking in the dark. And best of all, we have even more terrifying stories lined up as we keep the countdown to Halloween going strong. Join us tomorrow for Day 15. And as always, stay spooky, stay safe, and take good care of yourselves. You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go. Chicka chicka.